like to just do a very short introduction to myself and the lovely people we have on the panel, and then I'd like to give them as much time as possible to speak. The Horticulture group formed right at the start of the project, and I think we've been pretty strong and innovative, and we've done some really exciting things over the past few years. And we've had quite a wide range of different people involved, a lot of good visits. We've had mass scale flower farming, small scale ornamental, commercial gardens, small scale direct sales, and sort of a little bit of everything in between. But I'd like to introduce Emma Bedard at Prideaux Garden Pasto, and then Nicola and Chris, who are at Heligan. I don't think Heligan really needs any introduction. If you don't know it, then where have you been? And I'm going to pass on to Emma first.
So this is actually the garden. It's right in the heart of Prideaux. It's 1 acre. It's on a southeast facing slope, so it gets pretty baked in the summer, but we've got a huge diversity of stuff going on. There we go. Right, I don't know why, but we've started straight with the data, and I have to be honest, I'm so sorry, Hannah, but sometimes the data really bamboozles me. I sort of feel like I have a very instinctual understanding of what's going on within the garden in terms of like looking at the soil, the worms. I don't know why, but the last 2 times that Alex has come to do testing, the worms have deserted us. We sort of started on high with the highest worm count, and ever since then it's been diabolical. But he always seems to come in the height of summer and they just burrow away because of the fact that it's full on sun. Oh, sorry. The interesting thing about this is, whilst I don't necessarily fully understand everything that's going on, coming back to what Mike was saying about the permanent pasture up on the downs, the feral patch is like a feral patch where I literally do nothing. And the cold frame has also had little input other than a lot of weeds, which in a way sort of speaks for itself sometimes when you leave things to do their natural thing, whereas the flower garden and the veg garden are like the productive spaces, so we're taking stuff out and like there are inputs going into that, but it's, you know, there's stuff happening there all the time. But as I've said, like the garden is split into 3 different sections, and so there's quite a lot of different things going on. At the top we have kitchen garden where we produce vegetables and fruit that gets used in the bothy and served to the general public. Down the bottom it's more like cut flower production, and so there's a huge amount of diversity there. There's like a huge amount of real diversity in terms of the amount of crops that I'm growing, like within flowers and the vegetables and everything. There's just a lot going on. One of the things that I've really got from the project as well is in terms of the use of herbal leys, and so in the first year, I very enthusiastically decided to make all of our pathways in the cut flower garden from a mix of cover crops, which has been really hard to manage without any sort of animals or tractor or anything like that. But it has brought a lot of diversity with it. We also have this ongoing issue with bindweed as well, which I will come to. This is just to say that basically, even though there aren't as many of us from the horticultural side in this project, like I've always come away with stuff from different meetings from Farm Net Zero. There's always things that you learn. I think one of the things that I find the most frustrating is that we have a lack of livestock. We don't have any livestock, and I feel like quite often people talk about the benefit that that brings in terms of like the soil biology. We don't have that, but I have heard Ian Tolhurst refer to his worms as his livestock, and so that's really how I think about it these days. So as part of this, we've done a field lab, which was kindly funded by innovative farmers. And in the beginning of the project, we bought in a lot of green waste compost. And then since then, what we've moved on to doing is really relying on what is available within the garden for our own inputs. And one of those is we make a lot of compost. I don't make it on the same scale that you guys do, so unfortunately I can't quite hit the temperatures that are required to eliminate weed seed. But like I said, we have this real issue with bindweed, and so I've been working with Hannah to see how we can use the homemade compost from the garden to enrich the soil to help try and tackle the bindweed. And with that, we've set up trial plots, and we do have some issues with compaction, but we're no dig. And so this has been a bit of an issue. Also because when I terminate cover crops and herbal maize, what I am doing is using silage tarp, which in itself can lead to compaction, but trying to minimise that to just a month, so the tarp is only on for a brief period of time. And then we've been alleviating that with a broad fork, which is basically, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a broad fork. No. It's like, I don't have a picture of one, it's so stupid. It's like a giant fork with like 5 tines that go down, and what you do is you just sort of use it to lift the soil rather than you're not turning it over, you're not digging, it's just to aerate the soil more than anything else. So we've been doing a combination of broad forking, application of compost, and then it's worked really well in terms of like helping us knock back the bindweed. It is an ongoing mission, and there are like many, many different ways that I am tackling it, but it has been successful. Oh, this is just the timings in case anyone's interested. I don't know, I can see. Oh, the other thing I should add actually is that we did also use a cover crop in the trial patch. And for that, we used a mix of plants that had allelopathic qualities to really try and inhibit the bindweed growth. Out of all of those, I have to say Mexican marigold is like the winning ticket, because before we did this trial, a couple of years ago I had a tiny little trial patch with Mexican marigold, and when we came to do our second replication of the project this year, in one area there was significantly less bindweed, and I suddenly remembered that it is where I grew Mexican marigold like that 3 years ago, and even now it's still having an effect. So, yeah. I have this ongoing love-hate relationship with Icelandic poppies. They are like catnip to wedding forests. They're stunning, they're super beautiful, every bride wants them, they're amazing. They are a nightmare to germinate, and I've killed thousands of them because they're very susceptible to damping off. And compost that you buy in and sow seeds into has varying degrees of quality, and using that, I find it's not really good enough for me to have success. So there's a bunch of ways that I've been mitigating that, and one of them is I've been trial soil blocking, and that has been really, really successful. And the irony of that is that when you sow things into soil blocks, they sit in a tray of water. So you've got these tiny seedlings that you're not supposed to spray, you're not supposed to water from above, and yet they're sitting in a tray of water, and they are robust as anything. They do not succumb to damping off. They're just like the hardiest little things. And what it took me a long time to realise, and actually Hannah pointed it out to me, is that in the mix with the soil blocking, I'm including vermicast from my wormery, and therefore it's like the enzymes from inside the worms that are enabling those plants to be healthy and strong enough to make it through the growing process. Leading on from that, I've also been making a lot of homebrew. It's not like comfy tea, it's more than that. They're like fermented foliar feeds that I've been using, and I've been doing it with seaweed, using the Cashew EM1 that we've got from Agriton, which has been super helpful. I've also been doing it with comfrey in a similar process, and then I've been because I ferment a lot at home, and so I've been making sauerkraut for the garden with comfrey. But it is working really, really well. It's significantly increased the amount of flowers and fruiting, and so yeah, moving forward, that's definitely something I would like to do more of. I think that's me done.
That's really interesting, thanks Emma. I think there'll be quite a lot of questions there, but we're going to save questions for the end if that's okay, and we'll go straight on to Nicola and Bruce.
Hello, hi everybody. Yes, so as you know, myself and Chris are on the gardening team at Heligan. Those of you that don't know Heligan, we are approximately a 200-acre estate, and including in that is farmland, extensive wildlife areas, and 3 very different historical areas of gardens. So when we were approached by innovative farmers about being part of the field lab trials, we were really keen to get involved because we had very definite questions that we wanted to kind of answer through those trials, and they were to do with our compost. So we have a really varied estate and lots of amazing compost material available to us from the farms, from the gardens, food chip, everything. So really great compost that we can make. But we've been throwing that very happily around the ornamental gardens for years. But what we were really always very we didn't want to do, we were a bit uncomfortable about doing, was bringing it back into the productive garden, because that's where it would be best used and most important really. But the reason why that was because we were bringing the disease material that we were producing in the productive garden, things like blighted potato horns and any plant material that had, say, onion rot. It was all just going back into our great big compost heaps that we had. So we were really sort of concerned about bringing those pathogens back into the productive garden. So we wanted to make sure that our process that we have in place was dealing with that disease. So when if we could bring it back into the productive gardens, it would screen disease. And our second question about compost was also we have some pretty horrible invasive weeds. As Emma was talking about finally, but the big one for us is the Tudor oxalis. That's an absolute nightmare for us. So we also wanted to see whether our system could take small amounts of those invasive weeds and would, at the end of that process, would they be eradicated from the piles. So Chris is going to talk you through the trial that we did to see if that happened.
Yeah, so this is our base system. They're roughly 12 foot square, so you can get a tractor bucket in side by side. So it's basically 2 buckets width, depending on your bucket loader. But basically, the big corner bay is a holding bay, and then each base gets older and older as you go down the line. And every Thursday, myself or one of the other team gets in the tractor. There's always a free bay at the end, and we just turn it. Turn the end bay, the next bay, and so on and so on. And we try and do that once a week, every week, to keep consistency up. And that keeps the temperature up. And the trial really was, like Nicola said, to really drill down and improve it was doing what we wanted it to do. So we fed into it these little bake bags. In each one, there's some disease material from rhododendron, so that's got Phytophthora, some rhododendron. And then there was some sort of controls like parsnip seed. Hannah asked us to put dock seed in, so that's a big issue with a lot of people as well. the oxalis, bulldog and the tuber, bindweed, and then very optimistically we tried to put a coin in to see when at the end of it we could use a metal detector to find the vape bags. But the coin was obliterated. So that was a bit of a non-starter. But yeah, basically, on the start of the trial, skip forward a sec, I fed them into the compost, and as I was turning, I chucked a couple of bags in, turned a bit more, chucked a couple of bags in. And so throughout the whole process, I distributed those bags evenly as possible through that first bay. And then on the subsequent turns, I basically, whatever's on the extremity, I will take that and flip it to the other side. And then I'll take that extremity on the other side, flip it over. So you're turning that way as well as that way. So anything that's on the extremity of the bay, on the next turn will be in the centre, because when you look at the temperature charts, basically I had a big probe thermometer and I said, right, I'm going to take a reading top, middle, top, bottom, top left, top right, and so on and so on. So I'm getting accurate readings from the whole bay. It's quite hard to see, but essentially the top right and the centre, the centre will always be the hottest as you'd expect, but the extremities are quite a bit cooler, so you have to keep turning it in on itself so that whatever was out there at say 40 odd degrees is then put back in the middle and it gets up to mid-70s, 74, 75 degrees, and that's enough to kill all these pathogens that we wanted to kill basically. So we also had a set of controls to prove that this material was viable. We needed to set aside samples of the same material, so at the end of the process we could germinate the seed, we could put the bindweed into the soil, and it would grow and prove that the stuff we put through the system wasn't already unviable, which all it did. And essentially, by the end of the process, we proved it obliterated everything. We couldn't even find the vegetative material that had gone, including the oxalis and the bindweed, which was very reassuring. And yeah, now we've got a really nice product that we're confident we can put out anywhere in the garden without it being an issue. So we use it, like Nicola said, now we use it in the productive gardens. We've always used it in the ornamental sections. The downside is there's now a fight between each department to get who gets the compost. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just been comprehensive, really, and pivotal to know that we've got that confidence to use it everywhere. And it has a knock-on effect in the way we use it now that we're reducing hours of hoeing weeds in the productive garden because we're not having that exposure, we're not turning the soil as much, and we're releasing that seed bank that was already there, we've mulched it with our own stuff, and it's been brilliant.
And everything's produced in-house, so we don't bring
It's completely cyclical, we don't buy in anything at all. And at its basis, compost is a waste management system. We're getting rid of stuff we don't want, but we're turning it back into something saving us time and money. And I just said it practical to me. Yeah.
So I think hopefully we're going to demonstrate between us that not only have we got within the horticulture sector a huge diversity of crops, but we've got a real diversity of sites, business styles and needs as well. So the Real Food Garden is a business that some of you will know about. We're based not really that far away from here, despite me having a bit of a kerfuffle getting here today. We started out with quite an unusual starting point. We started as a values-based, a principles-based business because we were starting from scratch. And that gave us a really unique opportunity to work with sort of a clean slate and go from there. It seemed obvious to us that a no-dig system worked for what we wanted to achieve. I had worked on some large and some small organic horticulture sites, and I'd just been invariably really disappointed with soil quality, at bioabundance, and I wanted something that was going to purposefully be not industrial, purposefully be small scale, purposefully have attention to detail, and I suppose this is where we ended up after the course of one winter. So over the course of one winter we created a 1 acre market garden, and it looks more or less, I think the guys who do the soil samples will agree, the same now as it did at that point. No dig was perfect for clay soils, it was perfect for a business which had low capital to start off with. We got involved with the soil carbon project, I think it was in the first season, 2017, and we kind of started learning from that point, and it just mushroomed, I suppose. We know that we're locking in about 31 tonnes of carbon each year, and 19 tonnes of that is in our soil. And we've kind of got a 1.1% annual increase of soil organic matter. And we kind of assumed at that point, well, it's because we're no dig, we're adding on organic matter, we're adding material to the top, we're not cultivating, we're not rotivating, we're not losing any of that carbon, that's what's going on, it's quite straightforward. And it took understanding, and I've got to really praise the team in this project and Farm Carbon Toolkit for really helping me understand how this works and how the carbon is sequestered. Who's doing what? What's the microbiology doing? What are the plants doing? And to really give credit to the plants, whereas before I had assumed that it was me and my method, I had to really recognise that it was management, and that management was about plants. So a huge learning, which has been absolutely fantastic and hasn't stopped. I think it's also gone off in some really interesting directions. All of us were at the nutrient density event that we hosted at our site, which, you know, when you make a claim like my veg is more nutrient dense than your veg, you want to know that you're right. And it seems obvious when you understand if you've got soil which has a thriving soil food web, that you can grow plants which are happy, healthy, and able to take up those nutrients and those micronutrients from the soil, hold it in their bodies and pass it on to the human body. The link between soil health and human health is so utterly obvious when you look at raw ingredients like vegetables. And that's been brilliant for us. We tested our veg against supermarket organically produced veg, and we came out more nutrient dense every time. I've done this over a lot of different years, and the same thing has happened consistently. I don't think there's any other credit apart from soil care. This is a really simple thing. If we have poor soils, we have poor food. If we have healthy soils, we have healthy, good quality foods. It really is genuinely as straightforward as that. I think I would like to echo what Emma has put out there about the cross-pollination, the ability for us to go and see what different people are doing. I've also taken a huge amount from going to see other people in other parts of the sector. A few things came to mind. We had a great hedgerow management visit, which was really inspiring. The herbal ley trials have been following with a lot of interest. I've been using herbal leys on a really small scale for a long time. And green waste bedding at label. That really started to make me think about, we use a huge amount of green waste, obviously being no dig, but how I can improve that compost. What am I really getting from it? How can I transform that process? We also, during the course of this project, had the opportunity to buy an extra 5.5 acres, which then blew open again what we were able to experiment with and how we could start thinking about interconnections between perennial lays, herbal lays, livestock and horticultural production, and that's been brilliant for us. We've worked on closing the loop on waste, but without composting. We wanted to keep food as food, and really obvious vehicle to do that with our pigs. We don't do a lot, but we maximise all of the interconnections between everything that we're doing. So we're never going to be massive producers of pork because it's important for us that they are only utilising waste materials and that we don't become sort of a slave to producing pork at any cost. We also started using sheep on our crop residue, and we changed our rotation and started having a 4-year rotation with 2-part rest, 2-part herbal lay rest, and the sheep will come in, they'll eat the residue, the pigs will turn over that ground, we'll plant a herbal lay will sit there for a couple of years, being grazed by the sheep, being grazed by the chickens, and then we can go back into horticultural production. Again, none of those things on its own is massively profitable. It's all such small scale that it has to come together, and there needs to be these interconnections, and it's the interconnections that we found that have been really powerful. I've been designing agroforestry projects for landowners for a lot of time, but I think I really started to think about the role of trees slightly differently during this project. We planted about 120 fruit trees a few winters ago, and some shelter belts as well. When you start to think about how our livestock are going to really respond to climate change, you know, as I think as a group of farmers, have spent quite a lot of time thinking about how we can sequester carbon, how we can mitigate climate change, but we're also on the receiving end. Like, undoubtedly we are on the receiving end, and how we start to build our own resilience to that has been a big part of what we've done as well. And it's worth mentioning that with an increased understanding between the interrelationships with soil, plants and livestock specifically, I've gone into doing conservation grazing, and we're now conservation grazing on about 250 acres, taking those same principles, using all of those methods like long rest periods, which ensure that we are doing that same basic, what I consider to be plant biology, but in a livestock-based system. So it's been an amazing journey over the past 5 years, and I would say that Farm Net Zero for me has been a significant part of my the inspiring parts of my working life. But really, I wanted to kind of just give these guys a chance just to say a little bit more about moving forward. So, looking to the future, is there something that you'd like to be working on next?
I think for us as well, something that we've been thinking about in productive gardens as well is we're looking back to the nutritional value of the food that we're producing, and that workshop that we had about nutritional density was really interesting focus, and that's something that we've been very keen to look into at Heligan, and because we're a visitor attraction as well as a farm and a garden and a wider estate, and it's really great to kind of share those messages with people. And I think for all of these bigger issues that we're hearing about today, it's really great because we have an audience and they like to listen and they like us to tell them our story and what's going on. So it's important. We feel that that's actually something, the food that we're growing, how nutritious it is and how good it is for us is a really important message that we'd like to build on and share.
Yeah, so
I'm really sorry, I call them potions, but they are foliar feeds. But yeah, so I've been making lots of different types, and sometimes it's using, I've used apple cider vinegar to extract minerals out of things that are locally available, like oyster shells or eggshells. So using them, as well as fermenting various different plant things, and then using the juice from that as a foliar feed. I think the thing that I find the most fun with that is that you're producing really microbially rich stuff that you then use within the space, and it just, yeah, it's just sort of a bit, I don't know, it's like magic. Like I sort of applied this foliar feed right before I went on holiday, and when I came back, the dahlia patch had exploded into life, and just so many flowers, it was insane. I think leading on from that as well, I have been trying to save a lot of our own seeds, because those seeds are adapted to your own local environment, so they're going to have the best possible success, and they're already coated in the bacteria that they need to thrive in that environment, and that has also just, I mean, yeah, the difference is ridiculous. So, yeah.
I've got maybe time for one or two really quick questions. If we can be succinct. Yeah, Mike.
I'm just wondering, with your vegetables now, do you get fungicide diseases?
Do you get fungicide diseases with your vegetables? Do you put anything on them or no?
No, I don't know about you guys, but we don't use anything. We don't use organic stuff, it's nothing, like no chemical things whatsoever. No.
I think we've always operated organically, and I started off being prepared to use things that were allowed within organic certification. I don't use anything anymore. I don't need it. I'm not. I think it's complicated to try and explain, but I think the more diverse the system becomes, the more interrelated all the parts of that system become, the healthier your soils are. When I finally realised, and it took me a couple of years, that plant diseases and plant pests were coming as a result of issues within the soil, meaning that I had weaknesses in my plants, I knew what to address. And as soon as you can address that, I find that, yeah, of course, always a little bit of blight comes. But if your plants are strong enough, because they're rooted in good quality soil, they can cope the best that any plant is going to cope with, including, you know, if you're going to apply some kind of fungicide. You know, including sap sucking, I'd say about any sap sucking aphids, whitefly. We just don't get a problem with it anymore, because I think our soils are really well balanced, meaning that we've got healthy plants that are not overwhelmed by them. Of course they're going to come, all of those pests are going to come, but it's whether your plants are overwhelmed by them or not.
And you haven't needed to use any cider, because I've heard cider vinegar helps reduce mildew, or even milk can help increase the calcium to protect the plant, but you've never used any biological systems.
Well, I do use cider vinegar because I use it to extract the minerals from shells, but it's so diluted. It's like the tiniest, literally like a teaspoon in a watering can. It's like the tiniest amount. So
I wouldn't use any anymore.
Just so we do use a milk and water mix in our glass houses for things like the mildew in our melon houses and in the vinery, and we find that does hold algae mildew at bay. It doesn't prevent it, but it does. It's 10 parts water to 1 part milk, and that works really well for us.
I think that's all we have time for. I don't want to hold everyone else up, but I'd like to say thank you, and we're all still around.